time for another round of Brandy. Candid conversations over cocktails about all things brand. With your hosts, Reilly Newman and Scott Saunders, the brand developers behind Motif Brands.
How you doing? And welcome back to another round of Brandy. Today's episode is a Brandy Shot. And we are focusing on something that's kind of been bothering Scott and I for a while, for the last decade or so. Scott, you want to get into that?
Today's shot of Brandy is sponsored by the word established, and how that word and term has been infused in so many brands, and so many people with brands think that it is so cool to have, right? And that's not necessarily the case.
Right. And it's kind of one of those things where it's like, it had its use, it had its purpose, and it works in certain scenarios, and then it just got latched onto a trend and took off from there, and then just got misused and abused and taken to areas where it should have never seen the light of day.
Well, and so what started this conversation the other day was, a new brand popped up and part of its logo and everything, but it's established 2025.
Oh, good grief.
And to me, this has kind of started the whole thing of doing an established year within your logo and as part of your visual brand kind of started probably about 15 years ago. I think, back in like 2010 when, for lack of a better term, the hipster movement of design kind of was birthed and kind of came to a very popular trend. I loved the design part. I fell into that as a design trend for a while. But what we found was that, it started becoming a trend where logos and brands their logos took more of an emblem form, where you'd have the name and you'd have little design elements among there. And a lot of times designers started filling in things with the word trademark, but broken up. So you had TRD and MRK, to balance maybe the word mark of the brand, or going into established, ESTD. And the year is established because it's a 4-letter. You can bracket it with 4 initials on either side. So I can understand it became kind of a fun thing to do when you're filling the space within an emblem for a logo. And the trend should have died out years ago. It hasn't. And even today, I still see designers doing this or people that are building their brands.
The key word that jumped out to me there was that you said fill space. And it's like how people will talk to fill space. If there's any sort of silence, you get people who just talk and talk and talk, and they're not comfortable with silence, or what we like to call in the design is like negative space, where sometimes negative space or silence in a conversation, like negative space has that power in design to help it actually be more impactful, help it actually make more of a statement. And so this trend, which, you had them trying to make it feel nostalgic, make it feel, authentic and have like this heritage to it, but it fell flat because then everyone was doing it. And then if their company started in 2011 or whatever, they would put established 2011 or 2010. And it was like, okay, that doesn't hold any value. It means nothing conceptually to anyone.
Yeah.
And so why are you doing it other than just for aesthetic trend purposes that, again, you shouldn't follow trends in any design or aesthetic just for the sake of following a trend. And so going to Scott's point of like established is like the whole point of that should be if your brand actually has a legitimate history to it where there is some muscle to flex in that, then you have viability and able to kind of flex some of that. If you do have, a decade, even a business being around for a decade or two, it's like that is a very small percentage of businesses that can actually say that. So it's like, you can start working that into your history. And then like we've worked with a couple of brands that have been around for like a century or more. And so you do get that huge, that's a lot of weight to throw around of going, wow, they've been around for
being established
a
for since 1921. Well, that means something, right? Yeah. Or I see it a lot in, and I appreciate it in, because I love, I love brandy, but I'm a Scotch guy. I'm a single malt Scotch guy, and bourbon, but I love my Scotches. And particularly when you look at really nice, Scotches and things like that they'll be there, and it's like established 1897 or 17, in the 1700s. It's like, my gosh, that adds intrinsic value to when I'm drinking. It's going, this company's been around that long and making this, batch of libation that I'm enjoying even better.
And that's a good point because it goes with the nature of that industry where it's
Yeah.
about craft, it's about expertise, it's about age, like
Yeah.
a well-aged bottle. And it's like those things lean into the position of not only the company and the brand, but also just that sector as a whole. So it makes sense. But for some of these, it's like they're maybe a sweets company or something, or it's like it just doesn't make sense, and it just starts to go, okay, does that actually add to the positioning? Or
Unless
does it
you're
not?
like C's Candy, right? Who literally
has a grandma as their logo.
Yeah, and literally has all of that. And I think part of it too is like, for instance, even like a venue. If there's a venue that a theater or some sort of auditorium or amphitheater or whatever, and there's times like if it is an old, like an Orpheum Theater in San Francisco or something that, has who the marquee or whatever outside or some of the building features may still have that Art Deco style of the 1920s, because that's literally when it was built and it's been around that long, and all the furniture and the ornate decor inside, it speaks of being established for a very long time, so that can add value to the brand. But if it's a venue that is trying to perhaps be very, like boast on having the latest in technology, right, and the latest in features or whatever it is, saying it's been around for that long kind of could be counterproductive in the brand's messaging and signaling to its audience.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it kind of reminds me of what we talked about on that one episode about family owned and operated, how that can actually work against sometimes what a customer is wanting or maybe what your audience is needing.
I know, unfortunately, too many very dysfunctional families out there. So to me, being family run, owned and operated may or may not be a good thing. But people just seem to naturally, small businesses just naturally, we're family owned. It's like, okay, that's great. But again, it's the idea of like, when you start taking very, overused terms like established or, 3 generations or whatever it is, don't just do it to do it. It's got to make sense, and it's got to make sure that it's going to be an advantage to your brand, not a disadvantage.
You do have to take into consideration how the brand's positioned in the market, because there's tasteful ways of doing it. I remember always, wearing Vans when I was little, and on the Van shoes, it'd always say 66, and it'd say it on the tongue or something like that.
Yeah.
And it was because, 1966, that's when the company was born. But that went back to Vans, and their whole position was this, classic California surf skate brand, and it was like, in like Lords of Dogtown era, where it was like, that's what it tapped into, and that's what it's referencing through like vibe. And instead of them just not, I don't even think Nike references what year it was founded, because it's like, they're not that way. Nike is progressive. They are, pushing forward, pushing the boundaries. Yeah, they have their classic shoes, but they still are pushing the athletic the department. They aren't stuck in the past.
Yeah.
And so it's like, take into consideration and go, okay, who is our brand? Who is our market? And, will our audience actually, what will they think of that if we do put the year on there or whatever it is? And I just feel like that just following the trend of it being an aesthetic thing just to fill space, or it being this flawed concept of going, no, people actually care about that. We were birthed 2 years ago. People care about that. It's like, no, not necessarily.
Yeah.
It's
Now,
not going to add.
If your company like is one of the lucky ones that, let's say 10, 15 years have gone by since you birthed the brand, and maybe you're doing a little bit of nip and tuck to your visual brand, and maybe at that point you want to introduce to your audience that you're established, that you've been around that long. Okay, but that then it makes sense. But if you're just starting out, putting your established date in your logo or in your emblem or whatever. And again, we're not against emblems. I mean, you look at brands like Jack Daniel's, right? Their black and white label is so iconic that yes, the Jack Daniel's word mark can stand alone, but really its brand is the whole thing. All the scroll work, all the ornateness, all the little details in it, because that adds to its visual touch point of distinction that you find on the market shelf.
Yeah. And I do like the emblem badge approach. Like Scott was saying, is if you've been in business for 5-7 years and you do a rebrand, and then it's like, okay, let's incorporate a badge or something to help reinforce when we were established. Because again, statistically, a business has been around for 7 years. It's pretty rare. And being able to go, no, let's not have it so much baked into the logo. You don't need to throw it in there. But like having something that supports the brand's identity, and you can place it maybe in the footer of the website or on on the side of your bag or something. And it's like being able to have these little elements that support and reference the the history of the brand, but not fully hanging your hat on it.
You brought a good point. It's about if it's, let's say you've got a short paragraph of a story about your brand and its history, even if it's the background of a food packaging, you want to connect, have those emotional connections with the audience, and for a story to be told through brand is very, very powerful. So that's perfectly appropriate.
Well, and what's fascinating about it is that, referencing In-N-Out, is that In-N-Out is both very old, it's like 70 plus years old, and family owned. And
still, right?
So, yeah. And I don't see, from what I can recall right now, I don't see them putting that anywhere, except for maybe on the history or about page on their website if you dig in. But if anything, they always have their slogan, the quality you can taste.
They might have it. I think they might. Maybe I've seen it maybe on a pocket, like on the pocket imprint of their T-shirts that they sell, where maybe they have the logo or something. But again,
it's not underneath their logo.
Yeah, it's not everywhere. It's not on the mugs. It's not on the signs. It's not on all the instances that the logo appears.
And they're probably again, it's very rare for a business to be that large where they are still privately owned. And you have I think the granddaughter is at the helm of it, which is incredible.
Yeah.
So overall, I think the main point here is in your decisions with your brand is keeping your environment and your audience in mind and going, okay, is this actually, am I doing this just to follow what everyone else is doing or follow this trend or make it look a certain way? And again, why am I trying to do that? Is it this need I see in the market? Does it make sense for my audience? Does it make sense for how my brand's positioned? And then the strategy should actually then give clarity to going, yes, that does make sense, or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, then it's no, you need to be able to say no to these things and not just following. And please, for the love of God, if you start a business in this year, or if you did last year, do not put that. Don't put that anywhere near your logo or as a main staple.
I think Reilly's literally on his knees begging, gesturing. Please don't. For the love of God, don't do it.
You don't need to do that.
So again, just a word to the wise. If you do it, be sure you're doing it intelligently, and make sure you're doing it at the appropriate time and place, and whether you do it at all. So on that note, guys, we thank you for checking in on this little Brandy Shot for this week.
We will talk to you next time.
Cheers.